Indigenous engagement in 2021 at the University of Regina, and we're really excited to see what Lori's going to do.
Thank you. In response to what I'm going to do, I think there's been things that have been on the shelf for 4 years that were said, we'll wait until we get that AVP in. So I got 4 years of backlog to do at the university. Thank you for organizing the event and to the speakers before me and to all that they shared and the teachings that Michelle shared about our original instructions and our laws and things that we must follow. I was thinking about sharing a couple more that I think that are really important to how we think about this work with environment. We see a lot of Indigenous peoples out there protecting the land, being water protectors, holding space against the pipelines. You see this at Standing Rock, we saw it at Wet'suwet'en, even Oka. And I think it's important to think about that Wet'suwet'en and Oka and many of these places where Indigenous peoples are standing and fighting for not only Indigenous sovereignty, which was agreed to, but also for the environment, actually goes back decades. Absolutely decades. It isn't new that Indigenous peoples are standing up and fighting for protecting Mother Earth. And it is because of our deep love of Mother Earth that Indigenous peoples stand up and do this. We know that we are not here to dominate her. When we dominate her, we see what starts to happen. And ultimately, an elder shared a teaching with me saying that once Mother Earth has had enough of us, she will just stand up and shake her skirt off and we will all fall off as people. Mother Earth does not need us, we need Mother Earth. And once we're gone, Mother Earth will rejuvenate and come back, but we will no longer be here. I also think a lot about, you may have heard Indigenous people speak about like all our relations. In my language. And what that means. It's not just a phrase that speaks about like our relatives as our human relatives, but it's a phrase that speaks about, it's a concept that speaks about all our relations with everything that is around us. The four-leggeds, the crawlers, the winged ones, the flyers, the swimmers, the plants, everything around us. We think of everything as, understand everything to be imbued with spirit. And when everything is imbued with spirit, we relate to them differently. We relate to the trees differently, knowing that what they exhale, we inhale. And what we exhale, they inhale. We relate to the land differently when we know that it is our relative, not just a resource to be extracted for capitalism. We also have a concept called 7 generations thinking. And 7 generations ago, it's a beautiful thing to think that our ancestors were dreaming of us and making the best decisions they could so that we would have a world to live in. And I often wonder about the short-sightedness of politicians, elected officials, and thinking about just the next election. And where is the overall plan that is going to last 7 generations from now, not just 4 years in the making in order to get them reelected? There's an organization called the Indigenous Environmental Network. If you haven't checked it out, please do. They just released a report that said Indigenous resistance has stopped or delayed greenhouse gas pollution equivalent to at least 1/4 of the annual U.S. and Canadian emissions of carbon dioxide. It's important to recognize the work that Indigenous leaders and Indigenous peoples have done and are still putting themselves on the front line for that. And in doing that, that also ties in with thinking about criminalizing Indigenous peoples who are standing on those front lines. And thinking about the laws that are supporting and encouraging that. We also need to think about environmental racism and what that means. We should be able to ask any candidate that is running what environmental racism means and how it's impacted Indigenous communities. And if they can't answer that, then they're certainly not going to be able to work on a plan that attends to the climate crisis and climate justice at the same time. Having a conservative plan that is concerned about composting and the environment, but a plan that does not include the most vulnerable and those most affected by climate change is no plan at all. That's not a plan that I want moving forward in this country called Canada. A couple of the points that were mentioned earlier were really, if we're not thinking about Indigenous peoples when we're thinking about public transportation, for example, we know that lots of public transportation impacts missing and murdered Indigenous women. We know that mine caps going up for resource extraction hurts Indigenous women and children and Two-Spirit people in their communities. It is time to stand with us. Look at the Indigenous Environmental Network. Read the work that has been done. Find out how you can stand alongside and support Indigenous peoples and put your bodies on the front line and put your resources on the front line to support that work. I do believe this is the way forward. Indigenous peoples have been protecting the land since contact. It is not new for us. We've always lived in that way for generations. Thank you all for coming out today. I appreciate your work and your solidarity. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Laurie. Our next speaker is Dr. Britt Hall. Britt is a professor of environmental science in the Department of Biology at the University of Regina. Originally from Treaty 1 lands in Winnipeg, Dr. Hall's research focuses on environmental controls regulating the formation and bioaccumulation of contaminants in aquatic ecosystems. She's currently studying mercury dynamics in prairie lakes and wetlands, which are critical habitats for game and non-game wildlife species. Welcome, Britt.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you to the organizers here to invite me to speak today about the science. And I know that probably I'm speaking to many people that already know the science and believe the science, but I think it's important to bring it up every time we meet like this. So I will throw a number out at you. 417 parts per million. 2 days ago, that was the concentration of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. To give you some perspective on that, in 1750, prior to the real ramp up of burning of fossil fuels, the concentrations of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere were in around the 277 range. 413 day before yesterday. So we know that carbon dioxide is increasing in our atmosphere. We know that carbon dioxide is not the only gas that we need to worry about from a climate change perspective. We have to worry about methane, and we have to worry about nitrous oxide, and we have to worry about carbon fluorochlorines. These are all gases that are contributing to the change in our climate. And as time's gone in the last little while, there's always questions about the science, and that's part of science. So way back when we started measuring carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, one of the questions was, well, maybe we're just into a high carbon period. We're naturally coming into this. And that was a valid question back then. So what did the scientists, the climate scientists do? They looked back in time. They looked at the records that they could examine, and they could determine that in fact 700 to 800,000 years ago, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere ranged between about 180 and 250. 413 ppm 2 days ago. So we kind of got that one out of the way. Okay, so then that brings up another question. Well, how do we know that the carbon dioxide increase in the atmosphere is from burning of fossil fuels? Valid question. So we got the chemists on board, and the chemists went and they looked at the carbon isotopic signature of the carbon dioxide in the air. And the carbon dioxide signature in the air is very similar to those from fossil fuels. And so we are very able to say that the only way that the carbon isotope signature of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere could change was if we were burning fossil fuels and emitting them into the atmosphere. So we got that question out of the way. There are so many questions. Questions like, are all of these extreme events that we are experiencing now, the fires, the drought, the flooding, the typhoons, the hurricanes, etc., are these a result of a difference in our climate? Is the warming a result of the increases of greenhouse gases in our environment? So we got other people involved. We got physicists involved. The physicists looked at, yes, the greenhouse gas does increase the climate. We got atmospheric scientists involved. We got statisticians. We got modelers. And all of these people use their significant expertise and training to answer, or at least start to answer some of these questions. And there are still questions. We still don't know rates. We still don't know exactly how the future is going to pan out. But all of the work that all of these scientists are doing are addressing these questions in a way that is truth-seeking. It is truth-seeking. That is what science is. It might not answer every question definitively. We know that there's lots of exceptions to everything that we find out. But science is truth-seeking. And yes, it is a colonial institution, and it is based in the patriarchy, and scientists are trying to change that, trying to bring Indigenous viewpoints in, making science more accessible to people. But ultimately, the answers are there, they're coming, and we need to use them. And probably one of the most disheartening things about this recent climate, political and sociological climate, that is how experts in science have started to become a bad thing, untrusted. And so if I was to ask anything of you today, and I will ask a couple things. First of all, please follow and engage with the ideas that the other speakers are putting out. Please go and vote. Vote not only for climate action, but for truth-telling and for the support of science.
Yeah.
And if I could just get a little bit historical here, in 2012, one of the previous governments was not a very science
Oh, really?
focused government.
Understatement.
No.
And you know why? One of the main reasons they were not successful in the in that last election, when they lost their majority, the Conservative parties under Harper, was because people were mad that science wasn't being used as a decision-making process. We need to continue that fight because it's worse now than it ever was. People don't believe in science, they don't use science, they actively speak against science, and you need to fight for science along with your fight for climate action. So I ask you to do that, and I thank you for allowing me to make that ask for you. So thank you, and that's it.
Thank you so much, Brett. We have one final speaker, and this is Matt Finley. Matt is an organizer with the Youth Climate Action Organization Fridays for Future Regina. Thank you to them for all their work. And is a member of the International Student Climate Network. He's involved with both the performing arts and activism and pursuing studies in music and theater performance, and interdisciplinary studies. And he is going to perform a poem titled, Are You Prepared?
Hi everyone. So I'm just going to start my poem and then I'm going to have a short message afterwards. It's called Are You Prepared? For those destined to work in the building of steps and of seats, to serve those in your community, to cast the vote, on behalf of those right now, this very second, in a day-to-day struggle to stay afloat, both in this geographic location and places referred to as remote. Literally and figuratively, we are so consistently placed in such a place that bears the brunt of this crisis that we all increasingly face. You step out with young people in the street, walking in unison for change, based on ethics, love in action, and principle rather than the way of hatred and division, feeling the tension of pushing up against a system still paid to stay in its ways, rewarding the players who know best how to play the game. These days, for-profit pollution is still lawful, no matter if the majority considers it awful, as long as it's covered up good with promises of eternal economic growth, knocks on wood. So with all this in mind, and your presence here today, we thought we'd ask, are you prepared? Are you prepared to sail against the tide, that when you hold the ballot in your hand, you hold a child in your mind, sitting outside, wondering why yesterday it was blue with birds singing and now there's smoke in the sky. Water runs dry, yet still planting a sunflower seed to nurture this garden, the bees, the ants, the rain, the tree's shade that keeps one safe on a hot summer day. Are you prepared to run against the wind when your words flow through the mic, that economically incentivizing that which is ecologically destabilizing is morally unjust and not right, to be blown off course and lose some familiar support, yet to believe in what is true rather than to follow the politically convenient point of view? Are you prepared to go against the grain when in office you take a moment to reflect on all of the pain? Louisiana, Florida, New York, California, and all across the states, Bangladesh, Australia, Mozambique, the Bahamas, Germany, the Philippines, Haiti. Not to leave any out, but we could list this for hours, couldn't we? Without a doubt. Western Canada, Northern Canada, Eastern Canada, British Columbia, Turtle Island, Lytton, Northern Saskatchewan, please take the time to think, is there any more to give, to paint over, delay and deny science's ever-growing consensus and precision? Or will you be the one to lead, to rewrite the rules of this system, to have the courage to stand up to those who have for far too long used dollars to buy their way through the system, to build the bridges? The truth is that we all should too. And if there was ever a moment, it is now, the last chance we have to realize we can limit warming to 1.5, prevent the chain reactions, and save millions of lives. And lastly, as we speak to you today, and it's no lie, are you prepared? Because sure am I. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. One last message I'd just like to put out there. On Friday, September 24th, from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m., there will be a climate strike outside the Saskatchewan Legislative Building, hosted by the group I'm a part of, Fridays for Future Regina. Thank you. In solidarity, there's going to be climate strikes happening all around the world that day. Unlike past strikes, there will not be a march, but rather we will meet in front of the Legislative Building at 12 p.m. For everyone's safety, masks will be mandatory, and social distancing measures will be in place. There will be music, speeches, artwork, and we sincerely hope that you all can make it as you're here today. And please spread the word. Again, this will be happening on September 24th from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. in front of the ledge. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Matt. All right, everybody, this kind of wraps things up, but I have a few more things I want to share, and stick with me because you're getting probably your last suntan of the year. So, thank you for spending the last sort of 40 minutes with us. This is an important thing. We want to keep this brief, but we also, talk to each other before you leave. Get to know somebody. We're all working on this together. I also just want to say that, I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes you can't sleep at night when you think about climate change. Sometimes you have that feeling in your stomach that you just want to throw up because it seems so untackleable. Well, the advice that somebody gave me, and I think it's brilliant, is just do something. Do something every day. Just one thing, one small thing. And so here are a few things that you might want to consider doing right now. Between now and this election on September 20th, talk to the candidates in your constituency. Talk to them about climate change. Talk to them about Indigenous sovereignty. Talk to them about transit. Talk to them about science. Talk to them about all the things. And make sure that you're voting for a climate champion. You can also indicate your plans to vote that way by getting a sign like this from Amy, who's holding it in the air. Enviro Collective is selling/giving you away. Get your sign over there and over there. And sign a petition over there. Make sure you mark your calendar on the 24th, what Mac was talking about. That's at the ledge. Sign up and join one of the groups. You heard about several different groups today. Get on their Facebook page. Get on their mailing list. You know, when you can't sleep at night because you're worried, read through their newsletter. That's the very least we can do. Is there anything else people want to shout out that you can do today? Talk to each other then. Share with each other and enjoy the rest of this sunny afternoon. Thank you for being here.